I woke up to the same sound I'd heard every morning for the last 3 years. The soft groan of the farmhouse settling into itself. The heater kicked on with a wheeze. The wind moaned through the pine outside. I lay there a minute, staring at the ceiling fan that hadn't moved since Margaret passed. My name is Raymond Strickland. I'm 76 years old, retired police captain, and I live in a 2-story farmhouse just outside Red Elk, Montana. Population 800 and shrinking. I built this house with my own hands 50 years ago, and I'll probably die in it. At least, that was the plan. I sat up, bones cracking like old firewood. The bedroom looked exactly the same as the day Margaret died. Her blue scarf still hung on the back of the door. Her coffee mug, world's okayest mom, sat on the kitchen shelf like she might come back for it. I followed my routine. Black coffee, toast with fried ham, a glance at the local police blotter from the Red Elk Gazette. Then I pulled a chair up to the front window and watched the road, just like every day. Around 10, I saw the SUV come rattling up the gravel drive. Newer model, leased, not owned. Derek always thought he was slick, but I know the difference. I stepped out onto the porch before they could knock. "Dad!" Derek called with fake warmth as he got out. "Hey, we brought donuts!" Behind him, Kendra climbed out in her spotless white coat and oversized sunglasses. "We got your favorite, apple fritters. Derek is my only son. 45, lives in Billings, works as a safety inspector. Likes to call himself senior compliance officer, like that makes it sound better. Kendra sells houses to people with too much money and not enough sense. They only come out once a month, like clockwork. I always wonder what version of me they expect to find. Feeble, senile, harmless. Still running this old place on your own?" Kendra asked over coffee. "It's so quiet out here. Don't you get lonely?" I shrugged. "I like quiet." Derek leaned forward. "We've been talking, Dad, about maybe moving you closer to us. There's a community in West Billings, gated, full amenities, low maintenance, real nice. And," Kendra added, voice sugary, "you could finally sell this land before the market dips. You don't want to be stuck with something that's lost its value." There it was. That flicker. The shift in tone. I'd heard it 1,000 times on the job. When someone was working up to something they didn't want to say outright. I took a slow sip of my coffee. "And what would I do with myself in Billings? You'd be safer. You could relax. No more shoveling snow or fixing the boiler when it quits. Come on, Dad. Don't you want to enjoy what's left?" They smiled like it was all about my comfort, like they cared. But I'd known too many liars to miss the twitch in Derek's jaw when I didn't agree right away. The edge in Kendra's laugh when I said I'd think about it. They were pushing. Too hard. When they left, Kendra gave me a hug that lingered too long. Derek put a hand on my shoulder like he was blessing me. "You think about it, okay? Before winter really hits." I watched them drive off, the SUV bouncing back down the road. Then I went inside, sat in Margaret's old chair, and stared out the window. Something wasn't right, and I wasn't about to be their next mistake. The next morning started like the one before. Coffee, toast, blotter, window. But the conversation from yesterday was still crawling under my skin. They showed up again around 10, saying they forgot to bring up a few things. Kendra carried a reusable grocery bag full of kale and organic apples. Derek looked like he was ready to give a presentation. "You ever think about getting more fresh vegetables out here?" Kendra asked, setting the bag on the counter like I didn't know what a grocery store was. "We could take you into town later, stock up. Treat you to lunch, maybe." "That's kind of you," I said, "but I'm good with canned soup and bacon." She gave a short, tight laugh and wandered off to look at the pantry. Derek stayed behind and got real comfortable at the kitchen table. He glanced toward the door, then leaned in a little. "You still getting your full pension from the department?" he asked casually, sipping his coffee. With inflation, I figured they might have adjusted it. I stared at him. "It's enough." He nodded like he understood, then tapped the side of his mug. "Still keeping the safe down in the basement?" I didn't answer, just looked at him. "Just curious," he said quickly, raising his palms. "No reason? Just, you always like keeping things tidy." I gave a slow nod. "Still do." The rest of the visit played like a strange rehearsal. Kendra hovered near the study, making comments about dust and offering to help organize those old documents someday. Derek wandered into the basement without asking, said he was checking for mold, and came back up 5 minutes later looking like he just remembered where the safe was. I walked them out around noon, As they buckled in, I looked at their SUV again, a shiny mid-tier Lexus. They leased it, no doubt about that. Kendra worked in real estate, sure, but I knew her listings were slowing down, and Derek never made enough to be throwing money at luxury. "You two heading straight back?" I asked. "Yeah," Derek said. "Just wanted to check on you. You sure you don't want to come spend a weekend in Billings?" Kendra found a couple open units in her complex. "I like my own bed," I said. "Thanks anyway." They smiled, waved, and drove off down the gravel. That night, I poured myself a small bourbon, Margaret's cut crystal glass, and sat down at the dining room table with my old green folder. Inside was my will, still named Derek as the primary beneficiary. I flipped through the pages, my pension statements, the deed to the land, Margaret's engagement necklace tucked in a cloth pouch, the old badge from my captain's desk. I ran my hand along the folder's edge. Something in Derek's voice, just a little too casual, told me this wasn't over, and I wasn't about to be caught sleeping. Tuesday morning, I followed the same path I'd followed every Tuesday for the last 20 years. Down Route 8 into town, a left at the feed store, and a right into the small gravel lot of Red Elk Credit Union. I parked under the pine tree like always, where the resin stains the hood if you stay too long. But I wasn't planning to. Inside, the air was dry and familiar, faint coffee, printer toner, and that odd mix of carpet cleaner and dust that clings to old buildings. Most of the tellers knew me by name, but this time a new kid waved me over. Early 20s, straight posture, buttoned collar, like it was his first week trying to impress somebody. His name tag read Liam. "Mr. Strickland, sir," he said. "They said you'd be by today." I gave him a slow nod. Routine check. "Of course. Right this way." He walked me through the hallway to the vault, made some polite small talk about the cold snap coming in. I didn't give him much. My mind was elsewhere, on a safe box tucked behind a panel marked C19. Liam unlocked the steel door and stood back as I pulled the box free. I opened it right there in front of him. Inside was exactly what I expected. 3 envelopes of war bonds from my father's Navy days, 1 thick stack of 20s wrapped in a faded rubber band, and a blue velvet pouch that held Margaret's grandmother's necklace, a thin gold chain with a single pale sapphire. I put everything back carefully and closed the box. My fingers paused at the lock. "Don't suppose anyone's been poking around back here?" I asked. Liam looked puzzled. "No, sir. Only you and 1 supervisor have key clearance, and no one's requested access." I nodded once. "Good. Keep it that way." As we left the vault, I felt the hairs on the back of my neck shift. I'd learned to trust that feeling. Out in the parking lot, I paused just before stepping off the curb. About 40 feet to the right, across the narrow alley behind the post office, sat a gray SUV with dark-tinted windows and the engine running low. A Lexus. I squinted. I didn't need to see the plates. I recognized the dent in the back bumper. Kendra had backed into a bike rack in Bozeman last year, and Derek never bothered to fix it. I didn't go over. Just got in my truck and pulled out slow, like I hadn't seen a thing. But my stomach twisted. Back home, I walked straight to the small study off the dining room. The drawer that held the land title, the mineral rights paperwork, and the surveyor's map I kept since 1978. It was closed, but the latch didn't sit flush. I pulled it open and froze. The manila folder inside had been turned upside down. Pages slightly askew, the map folded differently. Only 2 people had a key to the front door, me and Derek. I locked the drawer, then the front door, and double-checked every window before heading upstairs. The next day I drove into Missoula and bought new locks. Something was moving under the surface, and I was done ignoring it. 2 days after I spotted their car outside the bank, I drove into Missoula and bought a motion sensor kit and a basic security camera. Not the wireless junk. You cut power to the router. Those go blind. This one fed into an old-school SD card, tucked behind a false wall panel in the study. The guy at the hardware store looked at me sideways when I asked about the motion range and night vision. "You expecting burglars?" he asked, chuckling. "Maybe," I said, not smiling. He stopped laughing. That night I installed the sensor above the study door and positioned the camera with a clean view of the desk, the locked drawer, and the floor safe. By morning, it was working. I tested it 3 times before I let myself sleep. Thursday's mail brought a single white envelope stamped with the Red Elk Credit Union logo. I opened it at the kitchen table while my coffee brewed. "Dear Mr. Strickland, this letter is to confirm that a request for a replacement key to safe deposit box C19 has been submitted on your behalf. Your new key will be ready for pickup Friday afternoon. I stopped reading. My hands went still. I never made such a request, and nobody but me has key authority on that box. I called the bank immediately. I want that request frozen, I told the girl who answered, and I want to speak to your manager. 10 minutes later, I had an in-person only hold placed on my account. No new keys, no third-party authorizations. I told them I'd be down Monday to update my file in writing. Around 2 that afternoon, the phone rang again. Kendra. "Hi, Raymond," she chirped like nothing had happened. "Just wanted to let you know Derek and I are swinging by tomorrow morning. We thought we'd take you to that new clinic in Helena. You know, just get your hearing and blood pressure checked. Keep you healthy." I let a beat pass. "Tomorrow?" I asked. "What time? 10-ish? Maybe closer to 9:30. They're hard to book, but we pulled a favor." I smiled to myself. "Sorry, I've got a meeting with my attorney, some estate paperwork to finalize." She hesitated. "Oh, well, can we reschedule?" "Busy month," I said, then hung up. I drove to the diner in town and slid into the corner booth where Liam was finishing a late lunch. He looked up from his sandwich, surprised. "Mr. Strickland? Mind if I sit?" "Not at all." I explained what I'd received in the mail and how I'd already called to freeze it. He nodded slowly. "I probably shouldn't be telling you this," he said, "but I overheard something a couple of days ago. Derek, your son, and that new financial rep, Marty Weller. They were in the back office thinking nobody was around. What did they say? They were going over a form, a POA, I think. Marty said if they could get the signature clean, he could help them access the vault without triggering a red flag. Derek said you wouldn't know what hit you." I stared out the window for a long moment. The sky over Red Elk was the color of lead. Storm coming. "Thank you," I said finally. "You did the right thing." When I got home, I checked the camera footage from the night before. There it was. At 3:12 a.m., the study door cracked open. A flashlight beam swept the floor. A tall shape entered quietly. Looked like a man, looked like my son. They weren't just probing anymore. They were moving in. The morning after I watched Derek on my security footage slipping into my study, I poured a cup of coffee and stared out the window like usual. But this time, I wasn't watching the road. I was thinking 3 steps ahead. They were bold enough to come into my house. That meant they thought I wouldn't catch on, or worse, that I couldn't do anything even if I did. They'd forgotten who raised them. Or maybe they never really knew. I drove into town and pulled into the sheriff's lot around 9 a.m. I asked for Deputy Rick Miller. He used to be a rookie under my watch back when I wore the badge. These days, he worked part-time, helping with investigations and small-town disputes, mostly dog bites and fence arguments. Rick met me in the back office, still chewing on the last of a breakfast burrito. "Cap," he said, standing up. "Didn't expect you today." I dropped a USB stick on his desk. "Footage from my study. I want you to watch it." He plugged it into his laptop and squinted. "That Derek?" "Sure is." He watched for a minute, slow and silent, then leaned back with a long sigh. "You want to file a report?" "Not yet," I said. "I want to catch them doing more." Rick raised an eyebrow. "How much more?" "They're coming for my assets, the lockbox at the credit union, already filed for a fake key, got a forged power of attorney, and they've got help on the inside." He rubbed his jaw, thinking. "You want to run a sting. I want to give them what they think they're after, and I want them caught red-handed." I left with a handshake and a quiet promise that he'd coordinate with the bank. I already had a meeting set with the branch manager, Mr. Ellison, a decent man with 40 years in the business. When I laid it all out for him, he paled a little, but agreed to play his part. "They'll think the key was approved," I said. "Let them in Friday night, after hours. You'll be watching from the back room. And Rick will be with me." Ellison nodded. "We'll make sure the vault's wired and the cameras are rolling." That night, back at the farmhouse, I didn't sleep. I sat in Margaret's old chair and read her favorite dog-eared mystery novel cover to cover without taking in a word. Around midnight, I got up and checked the locks again. The next morning, right on schedule, the phone rang. "Dad," Derek said, voice smooth. "Hey, just checking. Are you free tomorrow morning? Thought we could take you to the doctor in Helena, the one Kendra mentioned." "Tomorrow?" I said, playing dumb. Yeah, just a quick checkup. You've been a little forgetful lately. Figured it'd be good to get ahead of anything. I stared at the wall. Sounds good. I'll be here. Great, he said. We'll swing by around 9. I hung up and turned off the lights. Let them come. They thought I was asleep. I was wide awake. The credit union was already closed when I arrived. Mr. Ellison unlocked the side entrance and waved me in, looking more nervous than usual. Rick's already here, he whispered. Back office. You ready? I nodded once. Let's finish this. The vault hallway was dim, lit by emergency lighting only. A small monitor had been set up behind a partition wall, showing 4 angles of the vault room and the hallway just outside it. Rick stood with his arms crossed, eyes on the feed. They're due in 5 minutes, he said without looking at me. Got the POA paperwork loaded in the evidence folder. Cameras are rolling. Ellison rubbed his hands together, pacing slightly. This could end our bank's reputation if it leaks. Then let's make sure it doesn't, I said. I stepped back into the shadows as the outer door buzzed. A low voice murmured something at the entrance. A moment later, the interior lobby lights flickered on, and 3 figures appeared in the hallway camera feed. Derek, dressed like he'd just come from a city council meeting. Kendra, oversized purse on her arm, and a smile stretched too wide. And behind them, Marty Weller, the bank advisor who wasn't supposed to be working past 5. They approached the vault door. Mr. Strickland wasn't feeling well, Derek said to the clerk at reception, whose job was just to stall until they entered the vault. Asked us to pick this up. We have power of attorney here. He flashed the paper. It looked convincing. My signature scanned from some old photocopy, notarized by someone likely fake. Marty entered the code on the vault keypad. The thick metal door swung open. Inside, they made small talk. Kendra laughed too loudly. Box C19, Marty said, pulling it out and setting it on the central table. Derek opened it with a small key, clearly the replacement they had forged. He looked inside. The cash was still there. So were the war bonds, the jewelry, everything I'd put in. Damn, Derek whispered. It's all here. Kendra pulled out the pouch with Margaret's necklace. This alone could get us 10, maybe 12 grand. And the cash will buy us time to get him evaluated, Derek said. We get him declared mentally unfit. We don't need the will. We control everything. Elder care facilities already lined up, Kendra added. Private wing, out of sight. Rick leaned forward. We move on your word. I gave a nod. Go. The side door burst open before they could close the box. Rick came in first, badge raised. Behind him, 2 uniformed deputies and Mr. Ellison. Derek froze, hands still inside the box. Kendra backed up fast, the necklace dropping to the floor. Hands where I can see them, Rick barked. Now. Marty stumbled back against the wall, pale as snow. I was just helping. Rick cuffed him first. Kendra stammered, This is a mistake. This is a family errand. Raymond asked us to... No, he didn't, I said from behind her. All 3 turned. I stepped out of the shadows into the fluorescent light of the vault. Derek's face drained of color. You set us up? He asked. I looked him square in the eye. No, son. You did. Rick finished reading them their rights as the deputies led them out one by one. Kendra cried the whole time. Marty kept shaking his head like he still couldn't believe it. Derek didn't say another word. Once the vault was empty again, Mr. Ellison sat heavily on the stool by the wall, rubbing his temples. You okay? Rick asked me. I took a breath. Yeah, just sorry Margaret's not here to see it. Rick clapped a hand on my shoulder. She'd be proud, Ray. I wasn't sure about proud, but I knew she'd understand. By Monday, everyone in Red Elk had heard. Small towns run on rumor and coffee, and the morning after, Derek, Kendra, and that snake banker were walked out of the credit union in handcuffs. The phones lit up like Christmas lights. My landline rang 27 times before noon. Ray, heard the news. That's rough. Jesus, Strickland, your own boy? Some folks offered casseroles. Others offered silence. A few called just to ask how much money Derek had been after, like it was a game of numbers instead of blood. I didn't answer those ones. On Tuesday, a man in a stiff navy suit knocked on my door. He introduced himself as a regional compliance officer for the credit union. We're deeply sorry for the breach in protocol, Mr. Strickland. We're prepared to offer a financial settlement in exchange for your silence. An NDA, of course, would be required. I stood there in the doorway, holding Margaret's old coffee mug. It was cold now. You really think I'd sell my silence after what your employee almost pulled off? The man cleared his throat, looked down at the paperwork in his hands. It's standard policy. I shut the door on him without saying another word. That night, I pulled out my will again. It sat where it always had, bottom drawer of the study desk, tucked under Margaret's wedding scrapbook. I flipped through the pages slowly, marking changes in blue ink. Derek's name, gone, all of it. Instead, I rewrote the distribution to fund something that felt closer to justice. I called it the Margaret Strickland Trust, money earmarked for local scholarships, retired law enforcement counseling services, and fraud prevention workshops for seniors across the state. The lawyer said I could get it structured by month's end. "You sure about this, Mr. Strickland?" he asked me over the phone. "It's a big step." "Only one I've taken that feels right in a long time," I said. I met Rick for lunch at Murphy's Diner the next day. He didn't wear his badge off duty, but half the town still saluted him when he passed. "You holding up okay?" he asked. I poked at the edges of my sandwich. Some days, I feel like I can't believe it. Others, like I saw it coming the whole time. He nodded. "You're not the first I've seen pulled into something like this, but you're the first who caught it in time." I didn't say anything. I just nodded and stared out the window, watching a teenager wipe down the gas pumps across the street. When I got home that evening, I sat on the back porch and opened the old photo album. Margaret's handwriting still lined the edges: camping trips, birthdays, a faded ticket from a 1979 rodeo. I traced her name with my finger. "I could have used you through this," I whispered. The wind stirred the edge of the page. But even without her, I'd done what needed to be done. And now the reckoning had only just begun. Courtrooms aren't like what you see on TV. There's no dramatic music, no gas from the gallery, just hard benches, bad lighting, and the quiet hum of whispered conversations. But that Tuesday morning, when I walked through the courthouse doors in Helena, everything felt heavier. The room was already filling up. A few reporters sat along the back row, scribbling notes. I spotted Rick in uniform, arms folded, nodding once when our eyes met. Liam, the bank clerk, sat nervously near the front, flipping through a folder. And then, there they were. Derek, in a suit that didn't quite fit, his tie loose like he didn't bother trying. Kendra wore a high-necked blouse, no makeup, her eyes red but dry. They sat beside their attorney, a sharp-jawed man with slicked-back hair, who looked like he practiced insincerity in the mirror. "All rise," the bailiff said. The judge entered, an older woman with iron-gray hair and no patience for theatrics. The prosecution opened with a clear layout: fraudulent power of attorney, unlawful attempt to access protected assets, and conspiracy to defraud an elderly individual. They displayed screenshots from the vault's cameras, transcripts of Kendra and Derek's conversation inside the bank, and a copy of the forged POA. When it came time for the defense, their attorney tried to twist the story. "These were concerned family members," he said, gesturing toward Derek and Kendra. "They were acting out of love. Mr. Strickland has shown signs of mental decline. My clients were trying to protect his assets, not steal them." He even leaned into the microphone and said, "This is a tragic misunderstanding, not a crime." That's when I was called to the stand. I stood slow, walked steady, and swore myself in. The courtroom was quiet, too quiet. I looked at Derek as I passed. He didn't meet my eyes. Once I was settled, the prosecutor asked her questions. I kept my answers simple. I described the odd questions Derek started asking. The altered drawer, the letter from the credit union, the meeting with Liam, the forged key, the camera footage. I laid it all out, not with anger, but with clarity. "Mr. Strickland," the prosecutor said finally, "did you feel these actions were part of a plan to defraud you?" "Yes," I said, "and to silence me." "How so?" "They talked about declaring me mentally unfit, putting me in a facility. That wasn't protection. That was elimination." Then came the defense's turn. The attorney stood, buttoned his blazer, and walked toward me slowly. "Mr. Strickland," he began, voice oozing concern. "You're 76, correct?" "That's right. And would you say your memory is still sharp?" "Sharper than yours, apparently." A few people chuckled. Even the judge cracked a smile. He tried to press, asking if I sometimes forgot things, if I ever left the stove on, if I might have imagined Derek's behavior. I stared at him until he looked away. When it was over, I stepped down and returned to my seat. The courtroom stayed quiet. Then came the verdict. Kendra, guilty of attempted financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, sentenced to 18 months probation, a $10,000 fine, and mandatory counseling. Derek, plea deal. 6 months of house arrest, restitution of legal costs, and barred from acting as a financial agent for any elder for 10 years. The banker, Marty Weller, was fired on the spot by the credit union and fined by the state. The bank issued a formal apology, public, printed in the local paper, and read aloud in court. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed, but I didn't stop. I walked past Derek as he stood on the sidewalk, flanked by 2 deputies waiting to put a monitor on his ankle. He didn't speak, just looked at the ground like a child caught lying. I climbed into my truck, shut the door, and sat still for a moment. Margaret's photo hung from my rearview mirror, same place it always had. "We did it," I said quietly. And for once, I felt like she was listening. 3 weeks after the verdict, I stood at a podium in the community center's side hall, hands resting on a stack of pamphlets titled, "Shielded Years Elder Fraud, Prevention for Retired Officers." 27 people filled the folding chairs, more than I expected. Some came with notebooks. Others just came with heavy eyes and quiet nods. I recognized 2 old colleagues from the precinct, a retired dispatcher, even a woman whose husband had once worked for Margaret. "I'm not a public speaker," I began, clearing my throat, "but I know what it feels like to trust the wrong people, and what it costs to ignore your gut." Nobody blinked, nobody shuffled. They were listening. I talked about the small things first. How manipulation often starts with kindness. How people talk about helping when they really mean controlling. How silence when something feels wrong is the first thing that needs breaking. I didn't say Derek's name. I didn't need to. Afterward, a man with a stiff limp and a Vietnam cap came up and gripped my hand. "My niece forged my name on a reverse mortgage," he said quietly. I thought I was the only idiot who let that happen. "You're not an idiot," I told him. "You're just someone who believed the best in people." By the end of the week, we had 2 more events scheduled, one in Billings, another in Great Falls. Local news caught wind. A young reporter interviewed me at the farmhouse, standing next to Margaret's flower bed, while bees drifted lazily over the lavender. "You've become something of a folk hero around here," she said with a smile, notepad balanced on her knee. "Did you ever think, when this all began, that you'd end up here?" I shook my head. "I just wanted the truth to matter again." She turned off her recorder. "Was it hard, testifying against your own son?" I looked down at the porch floorboards. "Harder than burying Margaret." The story aired that Friday, short but honest. She didn't sensationalize it, just let the facts breathe. Neighbors stopped me in the hardware store to shake my hand. One couple drove 2 hours from Kalispell just to attend the second seminar. I kept things simple. One projector, printed handouts, coffee brewed fresh in the back of the room. I wasn't interested in being admired. I wanted folks like me to stop being afraid. Every time I spoke, I imagined Margaret sitting in the front row, arms crossed, half smile tucked in the corner of her mouth like she used to do when I got worked up over city council meetings or small-town politics. "You were right," I said one night, alone in the kitchen with a steaming mug. It wasn't about the money. The mug had a chip in it, Margaret's favorite one. I never replaced it. I rinsed it gently and set it on the drying rack. This house used to feel like a shell after she passed. Now, for the first time in 3 years, it felt like it had purpose again. And so did I. It was a Wednesday morning when I saw the foreclosure sign. I was walking past the edge of town after dropping off donation materials for the next Shielded Years workshop. The sky was clear, the kind of blue Margaret always said made the mountains look like a painting. And there it was, Derek and Kendra's house. Or what used to be theirs. The lawn had gone to seed, the hedges were brown. A dull white, "For Sale," bank-owned sign leaned crookedly against the porch rail. Curtains fluttered in the window, even though the glass was shut. I paused at the edge of the drive, just for a second. No anger, no satisfaction, just quiet. That night, a letter came in the mail. Not typed, not emailed. Handwritten in Derek's uneven scrawl. "Dad, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I think about what I did every day. Kendra left. I'm trying to rebuild things, but it's not easy. You didn't just catch me. You saved me from going too far. I'm sorry. Love, Derek." I sat with it a long time, read it twice, then folded it up, placed it back in the envelope, and tucked it inside the old filing box where I kept Margaret's recipes and unsent birthday cards. I didn't respond. Some bridges don't need burning, they just need leaving behind. Before bed, I walked into the living room and replaced the old irises in the vase beside Margaret's photo, fresh cut this morning from the back garden. She always loved irises, said they looked like flags waving from the ground. I touched the edge of the picture frame. "Still here?" I whispered. Then I switched off the light, poured a cup of chamomile, and climbed the stairs with slow but steady steps. In the hallway, everything was quiet, no creaks, no wind. I got into bed and pulled the quilt up to my chest. The moonlight reached the wall, but didn't reach me. For the first time in years, I slept without dreaming. Not because I'd forgotten, because I was finally free.